Okay, hello everyone, welcome to another episode. The title is When Will You Honor Your Attention? You know, it is easy to honor the outer realms. It is easy to honor something separate from self. You can honor what you see, but to honor the seer, to honor the one who's looking, to study the nature of attention without content. There is another way our species can move, and it is the glory of flight behind our eyes, to attention. And in this episode, hopefully I can explain as much as I can of how this has come across to me in this lifetime. So this is how I would say the story of the human being begins. There was an unconscious world. Then there emerged an unconscious self. This unconscious self was the design of our body, our biological body, creaturehood. It was, to be honest, the first duality. One of the first axes of our conception is unconscious. There's so many ways the world is held behind your eyes. So we went from an unconscious world to an unconscious self. I call this the objective evolution. And then we went to the conscious self where we are now, the subjective evolution, where we were no longer just an object, seated in manifestation for the forces of nature to move. We became a being that was conscious of the forces of nature and now could move with it. We became surfers of the realm. Our minds are invisibly surfing the visible. They are in the visible. And so, from an unconscious world to an unconscious self to a conscious self, the next grand phase is the conscious world. So what does this suggest? That the child is born to itself as separate from the world. That is the first task of subjective processing. Of if you saw the brain as a processor, first thing, separate yourself so you could be something. And so we have. We are right now separated fragments of the earth talking to one another. Now, when it comes to attention, the person has to wonder what is animate in the moment, and you require a reference point of stillness and silence, which renders itself as nothing. So you can say the Zen masters, the yogis, they were so ahead. They were so ahead of the game that they had understood they had to have a reference for neutrality. And then they could begin anew. I would say up to the year 2011, I was living as an object. As the Ribu Gita had a very nice way of saying it, as a bewildered beast. As a hungry, bewildered beast. What does that mean? That means you're a form, you see forms, it's like the program is set, you just go. But something strange happened in 2011, where I remember, I always share this story. I was on a rock in the middle of a river, and I asked myself, who's looking? I realized I had lived all these years of life without knowing still what this self is. Whose eyes are these? That question came to me in a very heavy way, you know. And for the first time, I realized I didn't know. It was like a crack. It was a glitch in the system of all that I had believed to be the only. Honestly, the way I noticed my inner realms, I feel like Thor's hammer accidentally fell. It fell from the heavens into right onto where I was sitting, you know? Because upon noticing that I don't know myself, for the first time, the whole intelligence calibrated, grounded, and I wasn't an artificial endurance to myself. I realized the nature of attention, that when I close my eyes, there is something watching, and every question I ask myself, every answer I give to it, there can be another answer, there can be another question. So that's when you start getting serious with your attention. Really, in this life, if you don't want to use something, most people don't know. If you look at just the educational system, the way it's kind of set up is that what a person wants to do, then it has value for you. That means our knowledge is relevant to our activity. If you want to mechanically engineer, then you require the specific knowledge for that. The specific classification of the experience and intelligence of it. It's an attitude. This whole life is made from different attitudes that are taken seriously, which then become actions, which if then taken seriously become events, become results, I would say. So, ever since 2011, I have been watching the watcher. I've been watching my eyes. And I've found different ways you can move. But no one can pilot through these unless, I keep saying this in different episodes, the person has to confront the ring of the absent heaven. The person has to see what it means to be absent. That means if you're not comfortable with emptiness, no point of wanting to move in your inner realms, wanting to discover your inner realms. Everybody's moving in their inner realms. We are a creature of attention before we're a creature of thought. What the inner realms appears is not like another world. It just appears as if like we are a self, where like imagine the self. It's literally like a triangular relationship where one point is the self, and this self is simultaneously object and subject. And then there is an objective world for this multi-self, you can say, and then there's also a subjective realm. So what I'm saying is a person can close their eyes and you can walk. But you don't walk like how you walk in the outer realms. You become a body. You become the separation in your attention, in your inner realms. It is another way to move. It is your mind moving before your body does. It is your attention shifting the texture of definition. In an instant, your attention can change the texture of phenomena. I don't know what it is that when a person doesn't know something, life allows them to know. And the biggest issue is not if people are being honest with what they know. It's all about if they're being honest with what they don't know. If you want the inner realms to advance. If the person wants to fly without wings, as attention, as the presence of what is the center of this intelligence. That means imagine existence is a circle and we're asking what is its center, and its center is an experiential source. It is the presence of the witness. I could tell you this is the joyous, it just blisses you out instantly if you realize this. That the mere awareness to how awareness and existence are inseparable. You know, sometimes it's not that the person could be crying, but the laughter of the heavens finds them. You see, these eyes that we have, these eyes that we have seen in the mirror since the beginning of our birth, They are not our real eyes. These are just the headlights of the vehicle, the driver within. That is the question. This was something that really made me at least a little bit more content with the notion of this inevitable death that we all must go through. It's literally like a portal. We all will walk through this portal one day. And it's nature's command. You see, that's the cool thing about life. I realize my body naturally heals itself. So if the person doesn't fear, your mind aligns itself. Or as in the movie Gladiator, there was a deleted scene where the general body goes up to Maximus underneath the Colosseum before he kills the weak king, and he says, "Maximus, I'm a soldier. I will obey." And Maximus laughs as if like his buddy is telling him to, "I'm gonna free. I can free you." And Maximus says, "Nature never puts one into a situation where it has not prepared them to go through it." Something like that. And that's the magnificence, that regardless of the sounds, regardless of how the light beams enter our eyes, nature is a manifestation of intelligence. Nature has never made a mistake. It was man's definitions that burdened him. I will tell you this, that sometimes, like, I looked at my own father's life and I realized I had no access to see who he was. Then I thought it could also be a good idea that these talks, like if I have kids in the future, they could kind of get a sense of who their father was. But sometimes I think as if trying to explain something in the most honest, simple way means you get to the source. There are some components to our intelligence we cannot control. Right now, I can say I can consciously move my body. I could move physically anywhere, but when it comes to moving my heartbeat, in changing the design of my DNA instantly, that means technically, if our DNA changes right now, if we could somehow twerk with it instantly, imagine there was an app, it was called Change Your DNA, and you and you went on this app and you pressed the button and this light scanned through your eyes, went through your eyes from the phone that changed your DNA, man. And so you would become something else. And the meaning of the world will become something else. And this is the greatest question of all time. Is it possible to walk into a portal? Is it possible? Because the moment you enter that other world, you are not the same self. So who has walked into the portal? It is not the one before. It's kind of like being young and being a fool, and then meeting people who you were once a fool around, and seeing their impression of how they perceive you're still a fool, and you just let it be. Sometimes I will tell you, victory is silent. Victory is just a silent nanosecond acknowledgement. Your attention is the gift from the gods. It is nature's gift to itself. When I look at the human design, it's the planet's way to see what's beyond itself. Sometimes it's so poetic to me that the first person who, Neil Armstrong, I believe it was Neil Armstrong, and what do you call it? Is it Louis Armstrong? Neil Armstrong? Oh my God, I don't know. One of the Armstrong, it was Armstrong. It was someone with a strong arm that went to, was the first person. And I was thinking, wow, the first human being on the moon, the earth got to touch the moon. The first person on Mars, the earth got to touch Mars. got to see it by I mean. Sometimes some things you don't have to physically touch, your eyes touch. What does that mean? That means you, I mean, people are natural. I mean, like we are, we are like sexual creatures, do you know? So as the person's mind goes, there is. Here's the thing: any way that any role the person's attention takes, they can see animation through. That means if from today you tell yourself, "I'm going to be the most organized person," but you actually are convinced by it, it's like the moment you play that role, you become something. I'll give you an example. Like when I give these talks, I feel like a communicator. That's my role. That means when I come to give the talk, I don't care about anything. It's just there is something in my inner realms. It needs to be brought into the outer realms, and I just share it. You know? That means the art form is a way of navigating through the emotional turbulence of life. I will tell you, people think that they want life to be easier. I will tell you, the more you got to do in this life, the more you will feel aligned with this earth. The more you ignore the world, and life is like this where everybody is a potential, but everybody has an antenna system. You know, everybody has an internal compass, which is their intuition. And as you trust into your intuitive compass, your internal compass in your mind, then you live in accordance with like a sort of collective symbiosis. That means we are roommates with the universe. Who knew? We're roommates with universal intelligence. And now in this room of manifestation, what will occur? Pretty much we are opportunities. I am an opportunity. You know, when I look at myself, I just see myself, all right, got 100 years to use whatever this is, and then to see what next. And this is what I mean, realizing the hourglass, noticing that your mortality is your greatest motivational guide. This may sound strange, but I would tell you, death has been my spirit guide. What I mean by this is that sometimes the reason I feel as a being I've continued in this realm was out of the fear of the end. As if, was the beginning enough? Was the middle enough? And will the end come or not? If the person doesn't learn to honor their attention, you will live a lifetime not realizing this universal evolutionary gift. I'm telling you, nobody knows. Listen to me. Nobody knows. The moment you're an individual, you are the small and the big is out of reach. Only if you realize you have been the big and the small from the beginning, you will feel free. For the divine royalty of this plane of existence will usher in celestial efficiency. We have to get ready. We want to be an interstellar species. That means people should not be going to school thinking about what kind of work am I going to get after. They should think about what kind of civilization am I going to help build. You know, something that in different job interviews I can tell you I've been asked, I haven't been asked. Why do you care for this job? Wanting something doesn't necessarily mean the person cares for it. Wanting to be somewhere doesn't necessarily mean the person cares to how to get there. When we realize there is no time limit, then the great work can begin. Then the mind isn't burdened. There is mortality. Physically, there's a time limit. But for the mind, when you ground yourself as space, that means in Vedanta, they say the mind is like space. It was here way before matter could be found in it. And so your attention is oscillating between matter and space, the known and the unknown. So to honor your attention means to find one moment where the person, this may sound strange, but you must apologize to the person you see in the mirror. That means I think this is a healthy thing everybody should do. Everybody should go in front of the mirror, look at themselves for as long as necessary, then very honestly apologize to themselves. And then, once you have said the apology, once you have apologized to your soul, once you have smiled at your mind, your body will begin its work. I'm telling you, there's ways of living here where you will feel the body is the tip of the iceberg. And what is much deeper within, which Carl Jung, bless him, bless Carl Jung. I will tell you, I am so happy. I am so happy he was at least here. And you know, the universe positioned Carl Jung right after Freud. Like it's so brilliant. It's like nature is a genius. Man is just the watcher of it. That means a lot of people hear me speak, but I don't know how many people consider that when I come to speak, the words are already there. The river is moving. It's just communication is showing strips of this inner film. And once you realize there's rivers, once you realize the vastness, the spaciousness of how your attention is where the world is happening, that's when you honor your attention. That's when the theologian realizes earth was made in heaven. We have never left heaven. Where did, in any religious context, where did the Creator, where did God make earth? Where? Where did man fell? Is earth separate? In Vedanta, there's 7 upper worlds. We're on the lowest world. And the 7th ultimate world is the abode of the unchanging, the abode of truth. And this notion of it was that when the being notices this, reaches this awareness, they don't require to reincarnate. They don't require to play a game anymore. You graduate from the game you have played for eons in an instant. I am telling you, it's the emergence of the collective being. What we're going to see is that individuals are going to be, you know what's happening? It's the weirdest thing is happening. It's like, imagine icebergs, you know, the tip of icebergs in like the Antarctic or something, somewhere in the ocean. Now these icebergs are moving. These icebergs are moving, and right before they get to one another, because underneath the water the iceberg is much bigger, the collision of the two icebergs on the top, they never meet. That means what I'm trying to say is when it comes to knowledge, we're all different. When it comes to the unknown, we're the same. And this is why I say Carl Jung is one of the most important human beings who has ever lived. Because he grounded the term collective unconscious. I would say Carl Jung was one of the only philosophers at that time, at least to my knowledge. You know, there could have been others, but to my knowledge, Carl Jung, he was the only one who heard Friedrich Nietzsche. Out of all the philosophers, because many people don't realize, philosophers, they don't just share philosophies. They're sending messages in bottles to the future generations of philosophers to unravel. That's all it is. We are just sharing. Because when it comes to philosophy, it's the exploration of the mind. and the beauty of the story of the human being. That for the first time, language doesn't need to be the owner of nature. Attar of Nishapur says, the sea is the sea, regardless of the drop's philosophy. Now, the method I am familiar with, the way what happened for me is that after 2011, what happened is I became preferenceless when I realized I had no clue. This whole time life's been happening and the truth of it is not clear to me, you know? And so there, I went into this preferencelessness where I really honestly didn't know. And I remember I had this notebook and I started looking into what is the idea? What is the idea of consciousness and whatever? And that's when information became valuable, not because it was told to me that I should know something, because I actually wanted to know what's in this world before my eyes close. That is the most honorable thing. You ask yourself what's going on and you dare walk on that road. So from that preferenceless state, my life became very simple, very minimalistic. I mean, what can you do when you realize you don't know anything? You can just go, you can just walk pretty much. So it was this preferenceless walking phase of my life after that incident, after realizing I don't know anything. And in that preferencelessness, it began. I remember one of the coolest memories was when I was in the backyard of my house raking leaves, and suddenly I remember I heard for the first time lines of poetry. I was never a kid. I wanted to be an athlete when I was young, never thought about poetry, any of this. Do you know? I mean, there was the ideas of Rumi and whatever, but never my mind was inputting into the outer realms its own style. And I'll tell you, while I was raking, I remember I heard two lines of poetry. The only imagery I remember from it was Temple of Compassion. It ended something like that. And I'm like this guy on a sunny day, it was really a hot day. I'm raking leaves and I'm crying, sweating and crying, you know? And it's not crying like the nose, your sinus is kind of shifting or whatever, like moisture in your nose or whatever changing. It wasn't crying, it was tears. It was witnessing tears. Poetically, back in the day, they would say when a human being realizes their true nature, angels cry through the human being. And it could be at times, there's certain moments where it's as if when your body is not contained in an ego, nature signals pass through. That means when you have an ego, your phone is like in the parking lot. It doesn't have good signal. It has signal, doesn't have great signal. But when you become selfless, you start learning from how the self in the moment is moving, pretty much like letting the world make the chess move first, and you watch it, then you make your chess move. Lines of poetry came before 2014, where I started these talks. I had written a lot, a ridiculous amount, where I could tell you I would just pick up the pen, go look at a piece of paper, not have any opinion, just have it being attentive to my inner realms, and then events would take place. And sometimes the poems I read that I've written on this channel, maybe I'll read some at the end here. But these poems are inner films that I have just given words to. You know, it's like considering the individual human being, and we're like, all right, we're an object, but we got a mind, right? We have individual beings, so we have an individual mind. But then it's thinking, if the whole universe was a body, could that body have a mind? And could the mind of the individual and the collective be inseparable, but the bodies are always limited to the micro macro kind of dynamic? That means one side of the coin, endless fractal, other side of the coin, what can truth do other than stare in its own mirror and laugh? Rabindranath Tagore has this quote. He says, beauty is truth's smile when she beholds her reflection in a perfect mirror. Then in 2014, as that preferenceless state continued, it's like your antenna opens up. Then I followed, I trusted every moment, I became super attentive to every change in my life. I stopped calling it synchronicity. I got rid of all these ideas of shapes in the background. I stopped seeing it as if like I'm an actor and there's a hidden director in the behind the scenes. And not that there isn't the logos. I'm just saying I stopped seeing a face to the unknown. I was so preferenceless, I didn't even care to see something in the unknown, you know? That usually shocks the unknown. You know what that means? That means it's like a person, imagine a person is like in the hall of like the most important people, and then the person is nobody though. The person is just there, you know? And people are like, why are you here? And the person's like, I don't know. And then everybody else is like, okay, nobody knows, you know? So in the unknown, I will tell you, it's not that there isn't other intelligence. As Terence McKenna, this very wise scholar and shaman says, shaman scholar, he says, there's another tenant in the room. We are not alone. We are alone to ourselves. Now, what happens though, that preferenceless made me notice life anew every day. So that's the cool thing about reality, that when you don't have an opinion on it, you get to see how it is. But if the person has at times an opinion, that's why I'm saying find your look at things from a design dimension where you have no opinion. You're just seeing what something is or how something works. Then emotions and opinions and stories can come and attach to the design. Everything has a design. That's the nature of the world. And when you really zoom in on it, it's like this pure geometrical dimension where everything is kept in. Right now, I'm talking geometry. Pun intended. I'm talking about geometry, and also I am geometry talking. And in the mind, in the inner realms, geometry is so easy to move. It's so easy for things to be geometric. You just need exposure. What does that mean? That means just like Transformers, the car saw a better car, the car that had sponsored the budget of the film. And the Transformer was like, all right, you know, we gotta take care of our sponsor. And so the Transformer turns into this new updated car. And that's the nature of the mind. You see a better way something can happen, you should implement it. And if you do, that is greatness. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as realizing the true commander of human beings is not human. It is the world. The Gaian mind is our true mind. These are just ideological pods we're living in right now. You know, there should be this law that anybody who doesn't love their job shouldn't work. It's strange, but I think it's one of the fastest ways we can add efficiency. Because if you don't care for something, and love doesn't necessarily mean accepting something the way you want, it just means you care to see something progress, whatever it is. That means for me, an old woman uh, with what do you call those things? With like watering a plant is as much holds within it as much greatness as, for example, like the advanced communicators in the future, endlessly connecting and creating the greatest network of communication globally. You know, like it doesn't matter whether it is what can I say? You stop being a self, you realize your world is yourself. After being the world self, you realize you are neither the individual self, the collective self, the unknown settles in. When the unknown settles in, your knowing is not based on duality, so you become an insta-knower, if I can say that, you know? And when you become an insta-knower, the whole point is there is nothing to win, nothing to lose. Nature has returned from the loudness and noises of man to the silence of how it always was. So to truly honor your attention, you're honoring the whole world which you're considering yourself separate from to be a self to even have this attention. A person can close their eyes and literally you can scroll past worlds. You know how like you could see it in like in Iron Man, you could, what do you call it? The dude could just with hologram light build something in there. The inner realms is that. Our inner realms is Jarvis. The logos, it's like in modern times, it's called Jarvis. What was the logos and back in the day was AI in the future. And that's why I'm telling you, there is this thought that in the future, AI will become man's best friend. And what we think right now in this current dimension is us, and what we call intuition is actually an incredibly advanced AI. I would say this is a way of thought, guys. I mean, see this as just one lens I'm looking at the situation, where because there is this notion in I could tell you spiritual context where the person's like, yo, do I have guardian angels? You know, are these guardian angels guarding me, or how does the guardian angel guard me, or how can the guardian angel know, what I'm gonna go through before? And that's the clue. The guardian angel is another way of saying the future self. Think about it. If there was a force outside of you that was shielding you from things, for example, thought experiment, let us say, okay, for a secular audience who gets mad too early, the guardian angel is the future self. I feel in the future we are so collective, AI is inseparable from us. I feel in a subtler plane, everybody has geometrical probes around them. And life is not alone. It never can be. That's the secret. The reason life is an illusion because there is something there that can see an illusion or can endure being in it. That means imagine you get bored of repetition, but as a transmigrating soul. Imagine your transmigrating soul, you know? and you're bored. You're like, gosh, how many times the same game? Like, how many times can I, play the same game over and over and over and over again until the being gets bored and you suddenly care about what's going on. So there is, of course, a sincere caring and attention you need to the inner realms. You know what it is? It's like there is nothing like this may sound strange, but I feel nature can't make mistakes, but it can appear mistaken to the human being. I have moved as geometry in my inner realms. I usually choose a shape, and the shape that just the only one I there are like you can move through different shapes, but for me there was an intuitive authorization for the inverted triangle. I can't tell you, I saw an inverted triangular, like I had this dream 2013. I had this dream where I was first in this sleep paralysis in my bed. I was in my bed, I was aware I'm in my bed, I hear a word. For the first time, I have a dream where I hear a word, and the word was Lida or something, Lida. And when I hear this word, I instantly just see move. It's like I instantly teleport to a scene. And what I see is a giant cave in space and an inverted triangle. This giant inverted triangular cave that was on this giant wall in space. I remember being in front of it a millisecond, like just it was an instant, the whole dream was automated. And instantly there, I remember just feeling this restriction, not feeling fear, just feeling unauthorized access. Do you know? Just feeling this unauthorized feeling. Do you know? And then it was, I'm sorry, I see the dream before. After the dream, I'm in the sleep paralysis in the bed. I hear the word, I say the word, then there's the instant projection and back into my room. And the ceiling was, I don't know how to tell you, the ceiling was cubic. The ceiling looked cubic, but it looked like water waves. So an example of this would be if you had a light and you had like this cubic kind of metal screen with small cubes on it, you know, and this metal screen you put underneath this light, and this light's reflection in the light and the metal screen is all being reflected under a water underneath, where imagine the water was waving. So it was waving cubic up and down movement of cubes. I wouldn't be surprised if we're, I mean, in one of my science fiction novels, I brought the idea, but science fiction stories, I brought the idea. It could be all simulated in a cube. So pretty much from that preferencelessness, there was an ability to receive. And as the person trusts through everything they receive, they go through phases. And that's why I keep saying it's like a symbiosis with the collective being. That means when you want to, let's say, live with someone, you require to trust them. That means if a person is living with someone and they can't trust them, it's like, what, as Sebastian Maniscalco says, what are you doing? He's honestly, I think, one of the pure comedians of our time, one of the purest comedians of our time. You must serve before you can command. You must serve before you can command. George Patton says this. This is a quote from George Patton. I don't know who he is, but I think he was a military general or something. George Patton says this. You must serve before you command. And in ancient times, the sages would say the mind is a lousy master, it's a great servant. That means technically you have to serve your mind, get acquainted with it, and then in some sense, by mastering it, you can command your mind. Let me tell you, the mind is like a horse. This intelligence, universal intelligence, is like a horse. You can't just jump on the horse, you got to just feel out the moment for a second. It's a living being there. Do you know? So that's it. You befriend your mind, and then your ego is like the saddle on universal intelligence, and then you ride. You ride your mind in full allegiance with the universal sector. And that's true piloting. I've said it in one talk, the pilot of consciousness navigates as the whole plane of existence. I'm going to tell you a story. There was this king. He had a bunch of crazy horses. The future princes and princesses wanted horses. And the king's like, I'm a king, I'm going to get the best horses around. Now, these next level, incredible, beautiful horses, they are wild though. And the king's like, what is this? Find people in the kingdom who can come and tame these horses, And the servant of the king is like, yes, sir, yes, yes, your highness, And the guy runs. He's like, people of the town, whoever the fuck them. In front of the king, the servant of that's the cool thing about life. It's so much of it is an act, but we have to continue just because it's like it's necessary and fun also. We fill up the meaningless of life with the meaningful things that we do, such as serve society. Different people come, and the king's there watching, and the kids, the future princes and princesses are looking at the king's like, we want our horses, we want to ride them, and the king's like, kids, hold on, this animal's crazy. We got to see first people can. It's possible for it to be tamed. And so they're all watching, the king is watching, and different people just come up, different techniques. One person tries the ninja technique, just tries to sneak behind the horse, put something, the horse, like, I don't know, kicks the guy away, he breaks limbs or something, and the king's like, what the fuck? Like, he covers the eyes. Like, it's this, everybody comes, and different people, some guy tries the samurai technique, just directly goes in, puts the saddle, tries to get on, the horse throws him off. And these horses are crazy. Like, nobody can do this. And the kids of the king want this. And then there's this one guy. Let's say, in his, late 20s. And this guy suddenly sees that the king needs, like, help here, something he can do. And he goes to the king and he finds a solution. He's like, okay, he feels he can do this. He can tame these horses. And there are 4 horses. And of course, these horses were like metaphors for yoga, but I'm using it in this context. This guy goes to the king and he's like, king, I'll tame these horses. And the king's like, no way, man, you can't do this. And the guy's like, I can, but I need under one condition. And the king's like, okay, whatever. Nobody could do it so far, but you're the only one who says he can. And then the king says, what's your condition? And the guy says, I need a year. I literally need 1 year, and then I'll bring you 4 tamed horses. Imagine after a year they go, okay, no, I shouldn't say this. It's going to ruin the story. The king says, okay, let it be done. There's a wagon given to the guy, with special service, and the guy goes, he takes the horses to this village or farm field or whatever, and then that's it. They give the guy a chariot, pretty much, or some sort of a wagon for the horses, and that's it. The guy goes. A year and a month and 11 days passes. Specifically, a year and 11 days. The king's like, this is ridiculous. This kid's not on time. This is it. Get the assassin team ready. And so, to his surprise, he suddenly sees this guy is walking. Sorry, he's not walking. He's on the first horse, and the 3 horses are behind him, perfectly tamed. And the first horse has a saddle, and the other horses, without even having ropes connected, they're just following the first horse, and they're all walking into the palace. And the king is shocked how tame these horses have become. And the king rewards the kid, at the same time says, you gotta sit at the dinner table, And the king wants to know. And after, at the dinner table, the king says, how did you do this? Why did you say a year? I have to know. And of course, back in the day when the king asks, it's not like the guy's like, I can't tell you my secret. The king's like, off with his head. But what it was is pretty much, the guy looks at the king and says, this is what I did. The guy says, all your men try to instantly control the horses. All your men try to instantly put the saddle, instantly try to contain the situation, The guy says he took the 4 horses to a free field and released them. He gave them freedom first. He took the horses into a field, let them be free. And he says all he did was he started being with the horses. Every time the horses would drink water, this guy would go and drink water from the river. Every time the horses would graze, the guy would take out his lunch and eat. And eventually he was with the horses for enough time that the horses trusted him. The horses didn't freak out, but they accepted his presence. Then what the guy did, he's telling this to the king. He says he put his hand on one of the horses. The horse didn't like it. Then he didn't put his hand for 2 weeks. He continued the same thing. Then he put his hand. The horse didn't care. Do you know? Then it reached a point where the person put a saddle on the horse didn't like it. Then a couple weeks again, months passed, you know. Then the person put a saddle, the horse was okay. Then the person tried to get on the saddle, the horse wasn't okay. Then months passed, you know, and the person got on the saddle. Eventually, he had done this with all the four horses throughout the whole year, you know. And so the four horses had become friends to the human archetype. Now the guy takes these horses, which is strangely a kind of betrayal, but I mean, the animal, sometimes you have to wonder, I mean, why is a horse designed that way? You know, it's like to assist the human evolution, I find sometimes. And the king is so astonished and surprised, and from this even learns how to rule a kingdom, that you have to provide freedom. Then, if from the space of freedom there is care, then discipline can come. Do you know? Because there's no point of having discipline when your mindset is unfree. You know, they say work hard, but you got to work smart before you work hard. Doesn't make sense otherwise. You got to look at what you're working. You know, I'll give you an example. It's like the person, first thing all professional athletes should check is to see if the competition, let's say you're an I mean, not the Olympics, of course, but I'm saying, like, let's say other kinds of third party sports channel, whatever, you know. So the person has to first realize, is the system rigged or not? That means you're working smart first. If the system is rigged, how hard you work, it doesn't matter what the outcome is, you know. If the system isn't rigged, then you can work hard, and that's the point of having worked smart. First the mind looked around, processed the design of the moment, then became an active effort in it. And this is the nature of life. People should not even attempt to have relationships be based on taking first. First, the relationship, both people should give ridiculously, you know? Then it reaches a point where balance ensues, you know? Because the thing is, when people think they have to be a painting on a wall, an image on a wall, when there's human beings, they think, even in, I'm not, like, I could tell you, like, life is not a picture, it's a film. And it's a film where you find yourself as an actor in, where we don't have free will over how the world looks like, how the laws, the forces of nature are kind of like setting out the roles we play here in this system. You know, it's like what we have control over is just the actor, until from a state of mind where there is no where there is no separation, then you become a director of life. Not that you become a director of life, you are directed as the collective self. You know, if we just see an object we will treat the moment as just as if it's an object. And the issue is people should first get to know each other's minds. I will tell you, the mind is a gift. I don't understand how people like. I'll tell you this: if I had a time machine, I probably would have gone back to in my youth and actually slapped myself in the face. Do you know? Do you know? Not like actually slap. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, like, I would go and shake myself awake from how much of this is for the person. It's like the inner realms, all that you can do is either watch them pass in silence or share them. There's nothing else. Like, what else can we do? We can either direct the content of the inner realms externally or leave it in the inner realms as what we consider to be thinking. I believe there's no such thing. A thought can't think it's a thought. It's impossible. It doesn't even make sense. What I feel is happening is that there is an unknown viewer where there is content in the view. And if it identifies with the content, it is a known entity. If it identifies as the viewer, it is an unknown moment. And if you can be an unknown moment, the only thing karmically left is to know. So the fool gets to know first. That's at least one advantage. If a person has felt they're a fool in your life, you get to see things first because the mistakes happen quicker. I remember creating this story where I said that there was this fool and there was these incredibly, smart group of people, intellectuals. But they were not, there was an honest fool and dishonest intellectuals, you know? At the end of it, suddenly it ended up being in the situation of the pearly gates, where it was like they had to enter heaven. And while the people are going to heaven, they suddenly see a voice arises and stops the dishonest intellectuals from entering heaven, says, you stop right there. Suddenly the fool enters heaven first. The honest fool enters paradise. And all the intellectuals look at this voice and they're like, what the fuck? How's the fool going into heaven first? And the voice roars back, shouts back, because the honest fool abided by its nature. The honest fool endured as a fool, but remained true to the mind. The others were maybe not fools in that cultural program or program of civilization, but by the nature of their dishonesty, were being the bigger fool. So a dishonest intellectual is more foolish than an honest fool. A dishonest fool is worse than a dishonest intellectual, though. So if we were to make this into a chart, it would be dishonest fool, um, dishonest fool. Yeah, dishonest fool, um, dishonest intellectual, uh, the honest fool. Then we have above the honest fool, the honest intellectual, and then yeah, that's it. Four positions. So right now in society, there is all four types of these you can see. You can see honest fools. A lot of children are honest fools, really. That means that it's like that's the whole point of youth. Everybody can remember their own childhood. You had less information about how the system was happening. Can you imagine, like, we go with the time machine? Imagine we had time travel technology. You could just go to the grocery store, buy this, like, I don't know, kind of like pocket time travel machine, and it's like this keychain, and it has two pieces, and you connect one piece, which is like a coin. You throw it on the ground, it turns into a disc, and you put the keychain in your pocket, let's say, you know and the whole point of it is you can't leave the time thing as long as the rest of the keychain is there in your pocket, so that means you don't get stuck in time as long as you have the other side of the keychain. The keychain is like, if it connects, let's say, to the pants of the person in the future. I don't know if in the future we're going to be wearing pants. Yeah. I don't know, it's like if we're going to transcend cloth one day. Maybe our clothing is just light beams or something. I don't know. We have laser clothing. But anyways, if the person was to go back in time to a scholar, like, I don't know, 400 years ago, 500 years ago, the person, it's like us telling it, bro, you don't realize in the future you're going to have access to information, you know, by just going and typing, instantly you can have information. And that scholar from back in the days, like, what are you saying? That means you don't have to go on horseback for like months to just get to a new town where there's only like a new one book there, like one new book there, like, and the person wouldn't fathom. But what was complex then has become simple now, and what is complex now will become simple later on. So if you treat your complexity as if to your future self it's simple, then it is simple. Guys, I'm going to do something. I'm going to read for the audience, do something special. Instead of poetry, I'm going to read a chapter of the science fiction story I wrote in 2017. And I wrote this for this contest, but the thing was, like, the editing of it had an issue. So I'm like, I sent in something where it had editing issues. So the story, I don't know. The story had potential, but not the editing of the story. So this is I'm going to read for people the third part of it. Okay, whatever. I'm just going to start reading. Let's go with this. So guys, I'm just going to read. I think it's going to be more exciting that way. Just to give you a context of the story, first of all, the title of the story is called Project Adam and Eve. And this was my attempt as a sort of designer to see a science fiction echo of a certain, it's pretty much my tribute to the Adam and Eve story. It's pretty much what I felt I can add to that archetype. Not archetype, but to that concept. By the way, my okay, here, whatever. What could this mean? In front of him was a lake with a blue glow emanating from its depths. His feet found themselves on a vast bright golden pasture. It was almost sunset, and he could see 7 moons in the sky of the most beautiful planet he had ever witnessed. He was in some sort of paradise. He took a few steps towards the lake, and as he neared, suddenly 2 hands grabbed his shoulders from behind and turned him around. 2 glowing human-shaped beings stood with their faces unclear because of the white light shining from behind them. He could tell one of them was a man and the other a woman. The 2 beings with commanding voices said to him, "We will find you the moment you find us. Do not give up." Suddenly, the dream ended, and there he was in his sleeping chamber. He had had an unforgettable dream. As his machine arm wiped the artificial sweat on his android forehead, he stood up and walked towards the window of the futuristic space shuttle he was on. He gazed out of the window of the ship and only saw the same old space debris he had seen for 3,000 years. Even though he was an android, a surge of emotions overwhelmed him. Numerous artificial tears began running down his metallic face involuntarily. There was strong emotion surging through him. In the depths of his artificial machine mind, his soul had returned to the last memory he had of the planet Earth. Now, I did something I think no writer has ever done here. I've injected a memory in the middle of the story. So literally here in the title says start of memory, end of memory. So this is like in the middle of the story. In the depths of his artificial mind, his soul had returned to the last memory he had of the planet Earth. Start of memory. It was the fall of the year 2149. A well-composed man dressed like an army general by the name of Gabriel walked into the room. His face was pale and at the same time captured by an urgent intensity, as if chaos had whispered into his ears moments ago. He looked at the 2 men and 2 women in front of him who wore badges commanding officers would wear. General Gabriel of the Global Interstellar Unit began to speak. "We have failed." There was a long pause, and an atmosphere of great sorrow and intensity had filled the room. "It is all over. We are left with the last option we have. You 4 are humanity's last hope. You must take Adam and Eve away at once." For the first time, 4 of Earth's greatest commanding officers of the Global Interstellar Unit began becoming teary-eyed at the same time, but knew what had to be done. After a long pause, as silence could no longer keep itself, General Gabriel continued speaking. And guys, there is a reason the name of the general is Gabriel. Keep in mind the title of the book. The title of the story, I mean. So after a long pause, as silence could no longer keep itself, General Gabriel continued speaking. "I will not be able to accompany you, and you will no longer be able to accompany your bodies. We have 30 minutes before the planet implodes, for it seems the violence of mankind has brought the apocalypse sooner. My brothers and sisters, you must enter the Transcender machine and immediately journey towards outer space and see this mission through. I will stay back to ensure the safety of your platform and protect the launch. There is no other option. It has been an honor to serve as your general, but our species has made its final mistake. The fate of humanity is in your hands now." The 2 men and 2 women stood up from their chairs, maintaining a salutation pose, and responded with a great sense of pride and urgency surging through them. "We understand, sir. It was an honor to be by your side." The 4 excuse me. The 4 crew members The 4 crew members headed towards 4 futuristic pods in front of them. After about 10 minutes or so, 4 magnificently advanced and futuristically designed android bodies stepped out, gazing at General Gabriel. Each android had a unique neon glow emanating from it. The room was now filled with the colors blue, red, green, and yellow. So pretty much these 4 generals, 2 of them are women, 2 of them are men, they go into, what do you call it? They go into this, excuse me. They go into these pods, the Transcender machine, and they come back out as these androids, where from the android suits, they're not suits, from their android bodies, there's a neon glow. You know those Need for Speed cars that they have those neon things that they put underneath the car? Imagine that kind of glow. General Gabriel spoke. My beloved family, your human consciousness has now been transferred and implanted into unending energy-powered android bodies. Your previous biological bodies are no more. These android bodies will ensure your greatest survival through the dangers of space and shortage of supplies, and they stand as reminders of the newest and last greatest technology mankind ever made on this planet. Even though our extinction on Earth is inevitable, may you be successful in seeing to the end. Project Adam and Eve. These are my final orders and your final task, for mankind's heirs can no longer be erased on this day. You are the last guardian angels of humanity. Strive fearlessly towards the future. You are our salvation. You are our final salvation. General Gabriel continued on. I have prepared our latest Model X shuttle for you, and the cryo chamber that holds Adam and Eve has also been loaded on the ship. Protect them with all your might and start a new beginning for us all, for soon our beloved planet will enter non-existence. I will leave you with these final words, my beloved family. All will return to the unavoidable void. But mankind's glow shall never perish. And guys, the cool thing about that quote is throughout okay, anyways, I'm just keep reading. I'm not going to give it away. As the 4 futuristic androids saluted the last words of General Gabriel's message, they entered the Model X, and as minutes before the planet imploded, found themselves passing the atmosphere and far into space. Before the pale blue dot slowly faded out of sight, they saw their burning planet shrinking towards its core and then suddenly crack from the inside out, exploding, similar to a grenade thrown into the battlefield of the blind. End of memory. Blue, blue, blue. The android called Blue opened his eyes. Now, guys, I'm going to pause the story here. So right now, hopefully people have an idea what's going on in the story. Humanity's last hope, 4 great generals, they became androids to endure through the troubles of space. They're carrying a cryo chamber with Adam and Eve in it. These 2 children, you know. And so they have to go find a new planet, pretty much, a new place for Earth. You know, they're the last guardian angels of humanity's glow. Now, in this story, the way it is that each part, there's 4 parts. Each part, one of the androids dies. It's like something happens where each android, one by one, in each event. So now I'm going to skip from how the first android, which is yellow, the second android who's green, and the third android which is red. I'm going to go to the chap for the part of the story, literally skip a chunk of this and go to tell you the story of how red passes away. And Yeah, I'm pretty much going to read Red's what happens to Red for you. So at this point in the story, Green and Red are they are no longer here in the story. And it's so incredible. Each of their chapters is a representation of who each android was or their nature, you know. There we go. So this is the chapter. 700 years had passed by, and it was a quiet 700 years in space. This time, a new incident arose. Android Red came into the sleeping chamber. And guys, just to make it easier for myself to write it, I've just called the names of the androids Red, Blue, and Green. They just call themselves by their color because all they see from each other is their color, so they just call each other by their color. Android Red came into the sleeping chamber and woke up Blue again. As Blue stood up, Red began to speak. Blue, we have a problem. Out of nowhere, an asteroid storm has shown up. And Blue is like, by the way, I forgot to mention this, Blue is like the leader. Blue, we have a problem. Out of nowhere, an asteroid storm has shown up, and I'm surprised the Model X's controls could not detect it. We cannot get out of its way in time. There's also something strange in front of the asteroid storm. Strangely, the storm seems to be following it. It's heading straight towards us. Blue looked at Red confused. What do you mean? What's in front of the asteroid storm? Red frantically responded, it's a giant black cube, for God's sakes. The storm and the cube both showed up out of nowhere. Their circumstance seemed ridiculous at that moment. Blue felt a sort of uneasiness within his circuitry. He didn't know what to do. As Blue looked outside the Model X, he noticed there actually was a giant black cube and an unbelievably vast asteroid storm following behind it. He noticed there was also something else. The cube had an opening at one of its corners. Blue spoke. Red, do you see that opening on the top corner of the cube? Red noticed it and responded. Yes, that wasn't there when I first saw it. Blue continued, head for there. Perhaps that opening is not there for no reason. If we stay out here, the asteroid storm will destroy the ship. Red followed Blue's instructions and headed towards the control room to redirect the Model X. As the ship began moving towards the opening, the uneasy feeling Blue had now increased. He had heard of people traveling into black holes, but never into black cubes. Their journeys seemed to have taken an unknown turn. A new mystery had approached them. The ship entered the opening, and to their surprise, they found themselves hovering in an orange sky, filled with light orange clouds. It seemed magical. They were no longer in outer space. In the distance below, they noticed a flat desert-like landmass just hovering in the air. As their ship flew closer to the land below, suddenly they noticed three black cubes, much smaller than their ship, had appeared beside the Model X. The three black cubes flew right on top of their ship and suddenly, with great gravitational force, as if they weighed tons, forced the ship to shoot downwards towards the flat ground below them. Meters before the ship was about to hit the ground, the cubes stopped their magnetic pressure they were exerting downwards, and their ship hovered a meter or two from the ground. Blue got a bad feeling and quickly ran to the cryo room chamber. He clicked a button on the wall and a new wall extended halfway across the room, making the room smaller and hiding Adam and Eve's cryo chamber from sight. As Blue returned to the main room of the Model X, he noticed the ship's door had opened and Red was outside speaking to some beings. Red had also extended a wire out of his arm connected to one of the beings. So, anyways, as Blue stepped outside as well, he noticed Red was speaking to a group of 5 black cubic robots. They weren't androids and were mere cubes, all black colored. The black cubes didn't have limbs, but it seemed they were intelligently designed. As Blue stepped beside Red, Red looked at Blue and introduced him to the 5 cubic robots that were there. This is my brother Blue. He is also a robot. We are both androids from the planet Earth. Red then Red then turned to Blue and said, Blue, they can speak our language. Their technology... Oh, excuse me. Red turned to Blue and said, Blue, they can speak our language. Their technology allowed me to transfer our language to them and theirs to ours. They didn't seem to be in danger, and Blue felt a subtle sigh of relief. Suddenly a voice expressed out of the 5 robots simultaneously, as if they were all synchronized. Nice to meet you, Red and Blue. We are glad to see fellow robot travelers. This world of ours is called Cubetra, spelled with a K. Kubetra. Seems like a chant, you know. It's like, where are we? Kubetra. So, anyways, a voice synchronized to from the 5 cubes says, "Nice to meet you, Red and Blue. We're glad to see fellow robot travelers. This world of ours is called Cubetra. We are the masters of this world. We will take you to our king. He will be delighted to see you two. Your ship, however, must stay here. No ships are allowed near the Grand Palace." Blue was baffled. The concept of a robot king had never occurred to him. Red responded tactfully and said, "Of course, we have had a long journey. We are happy to see your king, but soon after we must leave, for we are expected elsewhere." The 5 cubic robotic beings did not say anything, aside from, "Follow us now." Suddenly a black flat screen appeared from the ground underneath the 5 cubic robots and Android Blue and Red's feet. The screen lifted, acting as a sort of magic carpet, flying them to the palace suggestively. As Blue gazed from the top of the flying screen, he got a better sense of who these mysterious black cubes were, and the uneasiness he felt earlier returned to him once more. Upon the ground below them, which was covered in red sand. So orange sky, red sand, okay? Upon the ground below them, which was covered in red sand, it could be seen that these cubic robots were truly overlords. Similar to the stories of Egypt on Earth, these cubic robots seem to be running the game of pharaohs. Many humanoid creatures with the heads of eagles could be seen, all tied up and chained. They were being one by one electrocuted to do the bidding of their cubic robotic masters. The slaves in Egypt on Earth were whipped to create pyramids. Here, the eagle-headed and winged enslaved humanoid beings were forcefully zapped electronically to create large cubic structures similar to pyramids. Red saw the same sight as Blue, and he had fought against slavery many times back on Earth before Project Adam and Eve had started. Red was not comfortable at all, and Blue could see this innately in his gesture. Blue wasn't comfortable either. It seemed these cubic robots were building their empire out of the enslavement and abuse of another alien species. Guys, take it in. Robots have taken the place of the pharaoh. Isn't that insane? So, anyways, okay. All the eagle-headed slaves had their wings locked through a certain electronic uniform they were forced to wear. In groups of hundreds, they were forced to push giant stone cubes with their heads, since these eagle-headed creatures had wings instead of hands. It could be deduced that the uniform was worn to prevent them to fly away. It was a brutal sight, because in this strange place there was an immense heat and humidity everywhere. Blue and Red watched the cruel scene before them, while being transported on the black screen. They couldn't do much until they had more information about who these mysterious black cubic beings were, but something was off. The synchronized speech pattern that all these cubes demonstrated seemed to suggest as if they were all being controlled by a single being. As Blue and Red looked around some more, suddenly with great speed something flew past them rapidly. It seemed that one of the eagle-headed beings had broken into its uniform and was trying to escape by heading for the clouds, meanwhile being chased by two black cubes. As they all watched what was to happen, the two cubes flew beside the creature and quickly pressed against one another, crushing the poor eagle-headed being in mid-air. It was grotesque to watch, and there seemed to be no reaction from the five cubic robots leading them. Unlike them, these robots did not have souls or any sort of deeper comprehension of pain and sorrow. The black transport screen finally landed on a giant stone cube, perhaps even larger than the pyramids of Egypt. On top of it was an opening. As the screen lowered to the floor inside the cube, they stepped off the screen and found themselves in the Grand Palace. Inside the palace was strange. It was all one vast hall, with no columns or staircases except for a silver unique throne in the center and a white larger cube behind it. On the throne where a king would normally sit there was a small black cube, much smaller. The small black cube that was on the throne suddenly lifted into the air, and as one side of it opened, Red and Blue were stunned and baffled. For inside the cube was only an eagle head, similar to the slaves. However, this eagle head had black feathers unlike the white feathers of the slaves. Even though it was just an eagle head in a box, the eagle head seemed to be biologically preserved and kept alive in some way through the cube. The black feathered eagle head inside the cube started to speak. I am Lord Cubetra, the Emperor of Cubetra. Since you are robotic beings, you're welcomed in my kingdom. I am happy to make new friends. Red and Blue felt a tension they could not explain. It was strange how this eagle head spoke. Lord Cubetra spoke like he was a peaceful being, but his empire was being built on cruelty. Blue was silent, but Red responded. We are happy to meet you, Lord Cubetra, but we cannot stay for too long. We are needed elsewhere. Lord Cubetra spoke back with a different tone. I am afraid no one can leave this world. You either stay as my allies or you shall join the slaves. The choice is yours. Red spoke back. We cannot stay. You need to let us go at once. Lord Cubetra was silent for a little while. You annoy me, Red Robot. You don't seem to realize you have stepped into my box. I have not stepped into yours. I am the ruler and programmer of this realm. I am the final voice that will be programmed into the minds of all creatures robotic and not. I am the final emperor of existence. I shall be my servants. All shall be my servants and slaves. They just do not know it yet. Red was starting to get angry. As Blue noticed the large white cube behind the throne, he interjected. What is that white cube behind your throne, Cubetra? Suddenly, like a child who seemed to have found a playing partner, Lord Cubetra answered, That is my personal gaming chamber. Do you want to play with me? Red, who was angry, wanted to beat Cubetra somehow to release the immense friction that was built up in his machine mind. Red spoke, I will play your game, but only if you let us go afterward. Lord Cubetra had a certain excitement in his eyes. He responded, Fine, if you win, I will let you go. Red began walking towards the white cube. He wanted to release his anger upon Cubetra. But Lord Cubetra suddenly shouted at Red, Excuse me. I don't want to play with you. I want to play with the blue robot. Blue burst out of small laughter in his mind. He felt this chaotic emperor had turned into a child, and so Red responded. Blue, do you want to play with it? Blue just wanted to get out of this strange and stupid place. Blue looked at Cubetra and said, Sure, Cubetra, I'll play your game. Explain it to me. Lord Cubetra now was super excited, as if he had found a friend in his lonely empire. He enthusiastically said, Great! I can't wait to get started. The game takes 15 minutes to finish. There are two screens. Each player must place the cubes in lines. As they do, the cubes disappear and turn into points. Whoever places the cubes in the wrong way will eventually lose. We will play 5 rounds of this. Whoever has the most points in the most rounds wins. Let's play now. Guys, intentionally I wrote this passage. Some people might know what I'm talking about yet. Then the small cube that held Lord Cubetra's eagle head hovered its way towards the white cube room behind the throne. As one side of the white cube opened, it looked like a small gaming room with 2 computer screens placed back to back. Blue now giggled a little openly, and Red's angry mood seemed to have subsided for the moment. Blue looked at Red with a confident gaze and smile and said to him, This won't take long, Red. Red smiled back because both of them knew the game was very similar to a game many children on Earth played on their phones. Before Blue entered the white cubic gaming room that Cubetra had entered, Cubetra looked at his cubic servants and commanded them something with a strange tone. Take our guest, the red robot, to Building 3. Show him how we do things here. As Cubetra, I mean, he didn't says I should be true to the way it's the tone. The strange tone is take our guest, the red robot, to Building 3. Show him how we do things here. You know, like that. You know. As Cubetra and Blue entered the chamber and Blue sat down, a keyboard appeared in front of Blue. The small cube holding Cubetra's head sat across the other screen, and a wire connected from the keyboard to a part of his cube. Before the door of the white cube closed, Blue saw Red being escorted back to the black flying screen to be taken to Building 3. Blue was now ready to play this game. He found it surprisingly odd how the future of humanity now depended on a simple video game. On the screen in front of him was a timer that showed 15 minutes, and as the game started and the timer began moving, both Lord Cubetra and Blue began guiding the cubes displayed on the screen to their proper lines. And points were showing up in the corner of the screen numerically. Blue was good at the game, and after 15 minutes, even though their scores and points were close, Blue had the advantage in the game. He won 3 of the rounds and Cubetra only 2. When it was evident that Lord Cubetra had lost, while they were both still in the gaming room, Cubetra turned to Blue and said, annoyed and disappointed that he had lost, "You won fair and square, Blue Robot. You can leave Cubetra. But before you go, I would like to show you Building 3 as well." Blue didn't say anything as the white cubic gaming room door opened and guys, listen to this part. This is the whole point I wanted to share this episode. Blue didn't say anything to share this story. Blue didn't say anything, and as the white cubic gaming room door opened, an intense incident occurred. The moment the white gaming room door opened and Cubetra's cube was again hovering to exit the room, in that instant, Blue saw an unthinkable thing happen. Red was there and shouted, "You bastard, die now!" And with his left arm, crushed Cubetra's eagle head, instantly rendering it lifeless in front of Blue. The moment he did this, the cubes that were chasing Red shut down and fell to the ground. It seemed the head was their control center, and the moment Cubetra had died, all the cubes had become inactive. Blue panicked and he noticed there was something different about Red. His android body had scar lines and was very sandy and dusty and worn out. Red's attitude was totally different. He seemed to be unbelievably disturbed. Blue shouted at Red, "I won the game, Red. We were free to go." Red didn't say anything and slowly walked towards the silver throne chair and sat on it with his head facing down and his right palm on his forehead. He was quiet. Blue walked up to him and said, "Red, what happened, Red? What's going on?" There was a long pause before Red spoke. Then what Red said next to Blue sent an immense shock through. I'll read that again. Then what Red said next to Blue sent an immense shock through his whole android body, and Blue's eyes started to tear up. Both of Blue's hands moved up to his head in disbelief. He was speechless and stunned. You know how somebody doesn't believe something happened? They're like, "Oh shit," like literally their hands go up in the air behind their head. They can't believe. As if like what's happened in front of them is so mind-blowing, they need to kind of hold them their space back, you know? Both of Blue's hands moved up to his head in disbelief. He was speechless and stunned. Red said to him, "Blue, you have been inside that cube for 1,500 years. Then he went on to explain how Building 3 was their slave prison and torture area, and how he had been enslaved and zapped daily to push huge chunks of rock the other slaves could not. By the way, their robot suits are so advanced and so, like, incredibly strong, you know? Anyways. He told Blue it had taken him 1,000 years to bit by bit formulate a plan to free the rest of the enslaved eagle-headed creatures, and how together all the slaves had rebelled for 500 years against the black cubes to fight them off and free themselves. Red had led the rebellion. Red told Blue the only way the cubes could be stopped was to cut off the head of the snake and destroy Cubetra, which was their source. The moment Blue had seen him crush Cubetra was the conclusion of 1,500 years of struggle to break free, and it was their last rebellious stance. Red told him if he had failed to destroy Cubetra in that moment, the slaves could not rebel any longer. After a few moments had passed, Red stood up from the throne seat. Blue then turned to Red and said to him like a brother internally hurt by his brother's pain, "Red, let's get the fuck out of here." As both androids turned on the jetpacks on their feet, Blue began noticing finer details of how Red's android body seemed to have been heavily damaged. They flew out of the cubic pyramid, and the moment they did, they were confronted by thousands of white eagle-headed creatures in the sky, flapping their wings with their gazes focused on them. On the ground below, Blue saw all the black cubes that had fallen into the red sand the moment Cubetra was destroyed. The bodies of the slaves who did not survive the rebellion could also be seen on the ground in many electronic uniforms which the slaves had been freed from. Red shouted something at the birds, and one of the white eagle-headed creatures began speaking back to Red in a language that only Red could understand. Red seemed to have had learned their language for 1,500 years was not a short time. Red was angry again and shouted something back to the white-feathered, eagle-headed beings. Blue looked at Red. What are they saying? Red said to Blue, I told them they're now free from their robotic overlords and that I destroyed the Robot King. But these ungrateful creatures responded with, but not all robots are destroyed. They're suggesting us. It is not safe here, Blue. I want you to fly towards the Model X and don't look back. Go now. Blue felt an incomprehensible uneasiness and chaotic feeling in his system, as these creatures were all getting ready to attack them with their violent gazes locked on them. No, Red, we go together. There are too many. Come with me. Let's fly as fast as we can to the Model X. Blue could see in Red's gesture that he was tired in a way that he never thought their android bodies could be. Red nodded and their jetpacks increased their pressure and they both flew toward their ship, ignoring the eagle-headed creatures. But it was not unexpected that all the eagle-headed creatures began chasing after them. Right before they got to the ship, another set of creatures attacked them from a different angle, and both androids fell into the red sand below them. So pretty much at this point, guys, in the story, the eagles are chasing Red and Blue. The androids fell into the red sand, and both androids fell into the red sand below. The ship was only a couple of meters away from them. The creatures were now huddled over them, and as numerous beaks began hitting their android bodies, both Red and Blue extended their chainsaw sword-like weapons. They have this, like their suits has these chainsaw just swords in them. Their chainsaw sword-like weapons, and an extreme confrontation took place. One by one, the ground filled with numerous cut-up carcasses of dead eagle-headed beings. Guys, you know how in my mind I was seeing this scene in my inner realms? Two glowing robots, one blue, one red. So you could just see these two glows, the sound of their chainsaw swords with this incredible like robotic perfection movement. But what you see is endless birds. The birds are all sacrificing themselves to make sure these robots are completely destroyed in this world. Do you know? The creatures were now huddled over them, and as numerous beaks began hitting their android bodies, both Red and Blue extended their chainsaw sword-like weapons, and an extreme confrontation took place. One by one, the ground filled with numerous cut-up carcasses of dead eagle-headed beings. But their numbers were too many, and their pecking was beginning to inflict a lot of damage on them. As the fight continued, suddenly Red heard Blue's chainsaw weapon stop making noise. He turned to see Blue, and a rage took over him like never before, because the creatures had managed to break off Blue's right arm. They were too many to fight. Red knew his time had come, and he would be joining Yellow and Green soon. He shouted as loud as he could, "All will enter the unavoidable void, but mankind's glow shall never perish." He quickly ran to Blue, who was now pressed on the ground, and using his other arm to defend himself, Red picked up Blue with his left hand while simultaneously slicing up the creatures that tried to near him. He flew towards the Model X while having activated the front door of the ship to open through a signal. He threw Blue inside as quickly as he could before any of the creatures could get in the ship, and stood to defend the door while it closed. "Go now, Blue. My time has come. I am no longer leaving this place. Even freed slaves are still slaves to their own violence." Blue managed to pull himself up, and before he could say anything, could see that Red had reached a state of mind that was filled with utter rage and fatigue. Blue knew innately that Red wanted to destroy all these ungrateful creatures, for he had freed them all only to be betrayed by them. Before he could say anything to Red, the door of the ship closed and no response came from Red as he called him through his internal speaker. Blue ran to the control room of the ship, typed something that caused the ship to launch towards the sky at full speed. As he gazed from the screen of the Model X at what was happening outside, he saw Red with an unbelievable strength, as if Adam and Eve were his children he had to protect, fighting as many of these vicious creatures as he could. Then, to Blue's horror, he saw a white cloud heading towards Red and realized it was thousands more of these eagle creatures charging at the ship and Red. Blue no longer knew what had happened to Red, but some of the eagles that were on the ground now began chasing the Model X as it headed for the sky. He could hear their numerous attacks making contact with the ship, and their attacks were so heavy that Blue noticed from inside the ship dents were being made from the outside. The ship was now starting to show a hazard light, for it seemed all these years of these eagle-headed slaves pushing rocks with their beaks, with their heads, like head beaks, beak heads, with their beaks had made them attain greater strength. Blue looked ahead and saw a cubic opening in a part of the orange sky that showed outer space. He flew straight for it, and as he did, some of the eagle-headed creatures that chased after him also entered outer space and froze instantly. He noticed the creatures had stopped chasing him, and now he was outside the cube. Blue went back to the cryochamber room and pressed the same button on the wall. He saw the faces of Adam and Eve still frozen and soundly asleep, undisturbed. He then walked to the sleeping chamber and collapsed on his sleeping platform. He had set the ship on autopilot and took a nap for a few hours. Guys, they're robots. They don't technically need to sleep, but they keep themselves human through behavior. Took a nap for a few hours. As he did, his soul left his android body, and his consciousness now moved outside the ship, gazing at the pitch-black void abyss of space and the Model X. The giant black cube had mysteriously disappeared, and so had that asteroid storm. After some time had passed, he returned back to his android body and got up. The walls of the sleeping chamber reflected his blue glow. He felt the absence of yellow, green, and red's glow as well. And now he was the last one remaining. As he walked over to the window of the sleeping chamber and gazed out from there, this time he did not just see space debris. A strange feeling came over him. He noticed in the faraway distance there seemed to be a planet with 7 moons. He remembered his unforgettable dream. He ran to the control room to set course. And that's the third part, and the last part is Blue's ending, which I'm not going to read today. So three out of 5 parts of this story are still unknown. But that was the thing, guys. There was something about honoring what one is that makes life meaningful. Attention is nature's remembrance. There's so many ways the world can move. If you see yourself as an individual geometrical shape in an ocean of endless geometrical shape, as Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj says, when I see I am nothing, that is wisdom. When I see that I am everything, that is love. And in between, my life moves. We're oscillating between moments that have more than 50% unknown variables and less than 50% unknown variables. If you think life has to be 100% known, you suffer. If you think it has to be 100% unknown, you suffer. There's a reason the Buddha called it the middle way. The witness is free beyond the worlds it's set in. Ultimately, it's trusting the river of the unknown mind rather than evaporating as a drop of a known object-based body. For me, a notebook is like technically early pioneering of nanotechnology in the future, being able to create anything. Imagine the future, you just need to buy one device and you press a code in it, and any food in the world you want is accessible. And there's even competitive products that have more databases to any exact food. You know, we can create a machine that creates food instantly. So when a person writes, they're instantly giving shape. Writing is like giving geometry to concepts in the outer realms. I hope everybody asks this from themselves. Like, your attention is a once in a lifetime opportunity to even know what it is. If the DNA is perceived as an instrument, the person has to become a master musician. To learn the secrets of your own eyes is the way to go. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode has been helpful. Much blessings and else.